Beat Designer is a really cool MIDI plugin that allows us to quickly create great sounding drum patterns. It doesn't generate any audio on its own, but we can use it to trigger VST instruments like Groove Agent 1. I've already created an instrument track and selected Groove Agent 1. I'm using the Minimal Techno preset, but feel free to use any preset that you like. Now let's add the Beat Designer. Click on the MIDI Inserts tab here. Click on any one of the insert slots and select Beat Designer. If you've used a pattern sequencer before, you're probably right at home. If not, well, you're in for a pleasant surprise. This interface allows us to quickly create and switch between different drum patterns. We can see the various drum sounds along the left here. Clicking on these little speaker icons allows us to preview each of the sounds. We can change out a sound by clicking on the name and selecting something else from the list. If we know we aren't going to use a sound, we can simply hit this minus button over here to get rid of it. Adding new lanes is easy. Just click on the plus sign down at the bottom here and then choose a sound by clicking on the name on the new lane. The name also gives us the corresponding note for each sound, which is really helpful. We can rearrange the lanes by clicking in an empty spot and dragging the lane to a new position. This section in the middle is where all the fun happens. It's called the step display. This is where we can enter in our pattern. Right now, our pattern can be made up of 16 steps, which are all divided up using these little lines. The lighter looking steps represent quarter notes. We can make the pattern larger or smaller by clicking on these arrows here. Just leave it set to 16. We can also change the note value for each step by clicking on the step resolution drop-down here. Again, let's just leave it to 16ths. To start, let's add in some kick. I'm going to put it on every quarter note. Start playback. All right, now let's throw in some snares. To get rid of a note, just click on it again. It sounds a bit boring right now because there's no dynamics. Every note sounds just about as loud as the others. We need to change the velocity of these notes. It's really easy to do. Just click on a note and drag up or down to change the velocity or volume. The darker a note is, the lower its velocity. We can also set the velocity as we're drawing in the notes. If we click really low, the notes will be entered at a low velocity. If we click up high, we'll get a higher velocity. This makes creating dynamic patterns quick and easy. We can also add flams to the notes. Notice that when I hover over a note, 3 little dots appear. We can click to cycle through adding 1, 2, or 3 flams, which are basically short notes that precede the note. You'll see in a second. We can adjust the position of the flams using these controls in the bottom left. The 3 sliders correspond to the position of having 1 flam, 2 flams, or 3 flams. We can also adjust the velocity of each of the extra drum hits. This section here is the pattern bank. There are 4 different banks we can access by clicking on the numbers 1 to 4, and each bank can store 12 patterns which are represented by the keys down here. Make sure bank 1 is selected and click on the second note. Let's create a quick kick fill. Now we can switch between the patterns. I hope you're starting to get the idea of how useful Beat Designer could be for a live performance. Well, there's a reason that the patterns are displayed as notes, because you can easily switch between them using a MIDI keyboard. Click on the jump button up here. Now click on C1 and C# on your MIDI keyboard to alternate between the two patterns. Notice that once we select Jump, this Now button appeared. At the moment when we select a new pattern, Beat Designer waits until the current pattern is done to switch. If we select Now, they will jump right away. However, when you're using a MIDI keyboard to trigger them, Beat Designer will always wait for the pattern to finish. You can only achieve immediate switching by creating MIDI regions on the instrument track and drawing in C1 and C#1 notes. We can use this slider to the right of every lane to offset each step slightly, moving it behind or ahead of the beat. This can be helpful when you're trying to move something like the kick drum right into the pocket. We can also add swing using these two sliders down here. We can alternate each lane between the two swing settings using these buttons. This drop-down menu in the top left allows us to alter the pattern in a bunch of different ways, like shifting everything left or right, or copying and pasting a pattern. The most useful for me is Fill Loop with Pattern. We can create a loop region in the project page and then select Fill Loop with Pattern, and the currently selected pattern will be added. Not bad. You can see it's playing back the pattern by triggering it with C1. This allows us to quickly fill up a song with drums without having to manually write in the notes. If jump mode is enabled, it will actually add the drum pattern to the track so we can tweak it with the drum editor. We can also drag a pattern right into a song by clicking on the Patterns key down at the bottom here and then dragging it onto the project page. If you're not really into creating your own patterns, just click here and select Load Preset to check out a huge list of patterns that come included with Beat Designer. Now have some fun designing beats.